The Las Vegas Raiders keep making tons of moves with a blockbuster trade now for the former first-round pick quarterback in the 2022 draft, Kenny Pickett. This move comes after a devastating injury to quarterback Aiden O'Connell, and now it shakes up the Raiders quarterback room along with the Browns QB room as well. So this move completely shocked everyone. A lot of people thought the Raiders were going to just sign a backup quarterback after injuries to Aiden O'Connell. We'll get into whether or not this is a good move for the Raiders, and I honestly believe this has a high ceiling and they couldn't have asked for a better move at the quarterback position. You got a guy who has started 25 games in the regular season of the NFL. I mean, you don't get that often. Now, Kenny Pickett traded to the Raiders for a 5th-round pick in 2026. Remember, Kenny Pickett was originally on the Philadelphia Eagles just last season, and he's technically a Super Bowl champion. He appeared in that game, the blowout against the Kansas City Chiefs, and he technically has a ring as a backup. And a lot of people can't say that, so I guess we got to put some respect on Kenny Pickett's name being the Super Bowl champ. But the Browns grabbed him from the Eagles for a 5th-round pick, so they're recouping their loss there since they traded for him just this past offseason. Now, the Browns made the trade for Kenny Pickett before they had grabbed Joe Flacco, before they knew they were going to grab Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round of the draft and Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. And really, this made a lot of sense for the Browns to send Kenny Pickett away. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury as of late and did not appear in any preseason game, but a lot of people forget the fact that he had a lot of momentum in training camp. People said he was off to a stellar start at Browns training camp, and there are some Browns beat reporters who are saying that he could possibly be the starting quarterback for the team and beat out Joe Flacco for that week 1 spot. Unfortunately, due to the hamstring injury, he just never appeared in that many games. And honestly, if you don't have him on that multi-year contract, that multi-year rookie contract, it really makes no sense to keep him on the roster, even if he may be the best quarterback all around on the Browns roster right now. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I think there's a certain argument to be made that Kenny Pickett was the best QB on the Browns roster, even though now he's on the Raiders roster. So Aiden O'Connell, we know he fractured his forearm, his wrist, and that's why he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. But even though Aiden O'Connell dealt with this injury, I felt like the Raiders needed to make an upgrade at the QB2 position no matter what, because who's going to be the guy behind Geno Smith? After the disastrous performance throughout preseason, I don't think you would want someone like Aiden O'Connell to be your QB2. Takes multiple sacks. That's what he tends to do. He threw 3 interceptions against backups and had a fumble loss in this past game for a turnover. So Aiden O'Connell regressed. I think he looked better under Josh McDaniels type of offense, and maybe he could bounce back later in the season and find a role in the team. But I think either he's going to be released or placed on IR at any moment. What's funny is coming out of the 2022 draft, remember that was the bad QB class where you had people like Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, and Kenny Pickett was the only 1st-round pick in that draft. But you have this little note here from NFL.com going into the draft. Kenny Pickett's pro comparison was Derek Carr. That's what you're getting out of Pickett. And isn't that ironic that he's now on the Vegas Raiders today having that comp of DC4? And I think this guy is underrated. We're going to get into what Terry Bradshaw said about Kenny Pickett, the former all-time Steeler. But look at this guy, man. I like the fact that he's tough. He takes a freaking big-ass hit from Quinnen Williams of the Jets, and wow, what a monster hit. You wonder how he's going to react, how he's going to act. And look at this guy in this moment. Does not faze him at all. He freaking smiles, laughs, and freaking loves it. You love to see that. And hey, Steelers fans had a lot of faith in this guy at one point, being their 1st-round pick. But I feel like the Steelers under Mike Tomlin, they just never really committed to him. Always thought about having Trubisky here, Mason Rudolph here, and never really fully handed the keys to Kenny Pickett. And to be fair, the Steelers have really not found any answer at the quarterback position since Big Ben. And I don't really know if they're going to find that anytime soon. So is it really a reflection on Kenny Pickett that it didn't work out in Pittsburgh against the Baltimore Ravens, able to show some mobility and make some throws on the fly? Kenny Pickett here evading a tackle, delivering the football in the red zone for a freaking touchdown against a really good Baltimore Ravens defense. And these are the kind of plays that we saw Pickett make at times with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's part of the reason why this guy has a 15-10 record as a starter. Yes, the Steelers always have a good team. Yes, Mike Tomlin is a really good coach and they always have a really good defense. But I feel like offensively, outside of George Pickens, if you look at what Pickett had to deal with over the past few seasons, he really never had an elite wide receiver, really didn't have a cast of receivers that would make any kind of QB jealous and be like, wow, I wish I had the weapons that the Pittsburgh Steelers have. And even if he didn't have this record as a starter, you're kind of getting what you already had out of Aiden O'Connell. You're getting a guy who has played a bunch of games in the NFL regular season, and that is just so valuable as a backup quarterback. So I think this is a rare situation late in the offseason, right before the start of the regular season, right after preseason, where the Raiders got better. I think even with a healthy Aiden O'Connell, Kenny Pickett is a clear upgrade. Now, he has gone viral, especially with the Eagles last year as a big backup for Jalen Hurts, where he had some funny plays, right? There's this famous one where he kind of sacks himself and falls to the ground. I guess that's an incomplete pass technically, unless you want to do some tuck rule diagnosis of whether or not this is a sack on himself or an incomplete pass. But he's had some cringe viral moments, and I feel like that has made NFL fans write this guy off, even though he's a totally serviceable backup quarterback and still, like I said earlier, is sneaky athletic, kind of like Derek Carr. Remember him over there back at Pitt when he was just a young guy trying to make it and maybe one day join the NFL. He hit the league with the fake QB slide. And not only is this fake QB slide super awesome, but you also get to see how athletic this dude is on this play. Fake slide, boom, and keeps running against Wake Forest. And of course, he gets in there for the freaking touchdown. But this guy's got some wheels. This guy's got some speed. He's not just a pocket passer. And this is a guy who I think is going to allow the Raiders to exist and still be competitive and still have a chance to win games if, knock on wood, Lord forbids, Geno Smith ever goes down. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, is the fact that Terry Bradshaw has always been a supporter of Kenny Pickett. He even kind of criticized the Steelers organization for moving on from Kenny Pickett for the combination of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in the 2024 season. He said famously, stay with what you got. Just build Pickett up. Get him another receiver. Get him another explosive tight end. Have the ability to protect Kenny Pickett. He said this famously on the Rich Eisen show and also criticized the Steelers saying, hey, I know they're going to want to trade for Fields ahead of the 2024 season. That's a huge mistake. You don't need Fields. Stay with what you got. Build him up. So Bradshaw, former all-time great Steelers quarterback, a big believer in Kenny Pickett. Now, I do believe the guy has a slight personal relationship with him. I kind of friends with him, maybe somewhat of a mentor. So Bradshaw probably has a soft spot in his heart for Kenny Pickett. But I think that just shows you the ceiling that this guy has, the fact that he still has some believers out there in the NFL, and the fact that he's still young. The Raiders' best options really were Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who doesn't have much experience, maybe a Tyler Huntley, who continues to bounce around the NFL, but instead you get the 27-year-old Kenny Pickett, born in 1998, on his rookie contract still technically. The Raiders are only going to be on the hook for his salary cap of $2.6 million for this season. Fifth-year option has already been declined, and then they can make a decision to bring this guy back, or maybe another team goes ahead and picks him up. And that's not too bad of a deal, $2.6 million, considering the fact that the Raiders are still paying Gardner Minshew $7.6 million for this year, and Jimmy Garoppolo $12.8 million against the cap for this year. And that's pretty cool to see for the Raiders, the fact that you got almost $20 million going to be wiped away next year when you go into the 2026 offseason. Obviously, Geno Smith is still going to be on the roster there, but the Raiders are going to have some serious cap to make some moves out there in 2026. And I think Kenny Pickett doesn't put you out too much besides a fifth-round pick in 2026. Now, when you take a look at Kenny Pickett's numbers here, obviously hasn't played too much. And this is sort of what I've been saying. The Steelers never really fully committed to him. That's why you only see 2,400 yards passing, 2,000 yards in 2023, 6 touchdowns, 4 picks. And then last year with the Eagles, once they already clinched, had that first round bye, then you went ahead and saw Kenny Pickett come in and play a couple games towards the end of the year instead of having Jalen Hurts go out there and risk injury. Kenny Pickett also dealt with some injuries of his own, and that's why you haven't seen him really complete a full season. You never know what could have happened because the guy wasn't completely awful, just not sexy when you look at the numbers here. Only having one game in 2023 with 2 touchdowns passing, and he didn't have a single game in the 2023 season with 300 passing yards. Now, we know that the Steelers are a defensive team. They like to run the football, and you still have some bright spots here week 12 against the Bengals in 2023 when Kenny Pickett had 278 passing yards. Now, I already know there's going to be some Raiders fans who are critical of this move. They wanted the Raiders to trade for Shedeur Sanders, wanted the Raiders to trade for Anthony Richardson, but none of those were ever realistic options, and none of those were even good options because the Raiders are going to roll with Geno Smith as their starting quarterback, not only for this year, but next year. He is tied to Pete Carroll. He is the franchise QB, and fans need to accept that. And what they needed was not some guy to cause a distraction and maybe even try to compete for the starting job just because he's really famous, like Shedeur Sanders, like Anthony Richardson. They needed a solid backup quarterback who could help them win games in the rare and hopefully highly unlikely situation in which Geno Smith gets injured. So I think this is A+ move by the Raiders, getting Kenny Pickett, a guy who's former first-round pick talent, who's won 15 games in the NFL as a starting quarterback, coached by Mike Tomlin, was on a Super Bowl winning team with the Philadelphia Eagles, and according to a lot of these reports, was beating out the rest of the Browns quarterbacks in the QB competition, besides the fact that he had the injury go against him, and also the fact that he's not on a multi-year contract, cheaper to keep Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders for the Cleveland Browns. So I think it's a great move. Not as flashy as a Richardson or Shedeur trade, but exactly what the Raiders needed in 2025 after the Aiden O'Connell injury.